Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin our webinar very shortly. We'll just give 1 minute for additional people to come in. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, so I know everyone's quite busy today, so we're just going to get started with our webinar. Our time allotted is about 45 minutes. We will set aside some time for Q&A. Please feel free to ask any questions during our chat. If we don't have time to conclude it at the end of our webinar, we will answer any questions as well as record this for everyone's reference going forward. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join Process Fusion and Interwoven Connections for our webinar, Driving Greater Social Impact webinar series on building sustainability through transformation and innovation. For our call today, I'll be introducing our guest speakers, Roger Mack and Tracy. Our topics of discussions are factors impacting sustainability that agencies are dealing with today. We really want it to be through the lens of Interwoven, some of things that most agencies have been going through, how they've addressed them today, and how they're looking forward to managing this through their strategic planning, best practices for sustainability, as well as areas of focus that could help you identify internally where you can look for areas for sustainability, and also where Process Fusion is trying to give back to our communities and other agencies to support them through these initiatives. And lastly, our closing comments. So my name is Moran. I'm the senior consultant with Process Fusion. I also have my colleague, Roger Mack, who's the vice president of Process Fusion, managing our non-for-profit and in charge of many of our ministry programs and services that we maintain.
Hello, everyone.
So a little bit about Process Fusion. Our organization primarily focuses on digital transformation. It started with grassroots, working with smaller agencies. Through our scale, we've managed to grow many programs which have supported 3,000 clients in small funding administration, to now through over 15, 16 programs. We manage and maintain over 300,000 clients through multiple service programs from our agencies. And we help manage and administrate over 400 million in funding across these various programs. So how we typically look at it is, how do we help from people, process, data, and technology? So helping organizations reduce their administrative workload from client services so they have more time to deliver quality services and support more clients. Processes and where you can standardize and simplify existing things such as intake, client services assessments. Data has been a major area for evidence-based outcomes, quality of data, and technology. Everyone's using different systems and tools. How can you better use the technology that you have at your disposal, or even different tools to manage it going forward and make it more seamless? And thank you so much, Tracy, for joining our call today and being our keynote guest speaker. I'm not going to be talking through Tracy's feedback here. I'm going to leave her to tell us more about her organization. And with that, we're going to end just the slides, and we want to make this more of a dynamic conversation for everyone. So one of the first questions I have, Tracy, is tell us about Interwoven Connections and your experiences over the last few years, right? Everyone's come off of COVID. It's been an extremely challenging time. And I would say one of the biggest areas for sustainability is the funding from COVID recovery funds and everything else has dried up. How has that impacted formerly Adopt for Life and interwoven connections?
Sure. So thanks first for having me here today. As you mentioned, I'm with Interwoven Connections. Interwoven, formerly Adopt for Life. So our organization started really as a grassroots organization in Ontario just about 10 years ago. And it was formed initially with the view of providing post-adoption supports to families formed through adoption in Ontario. Over that 10 plus years, we've grown into a much larger organization. That initial mission is still at the heart of who we are. So we provide adoption services and peer supports to families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. Interwoven Connections is the result of a rebranding that we did earlier this year that we really think is more than a rebranding. It's about the kind of bringing to life the shift and the evolution of our organization that really for us started long before COVID, but has represented this growth in who we are and who we seek to serve, and as you mentioned, the social impact that we intend to have. We support parents and caregivers, and we support parents and caregivers with a very specific focus on how do we support them so they can better support their children. Um, the models that we operate on, so first, we're a national charity. We operate primarily within Ontario today for direct service delivery to families, but we also partner nationally across the country with researchers, community agencies, other service delivery partners to affect change for parents and for caregivers. I have a dual role at Interwoven. So I lead, as your previous slide said, I lead what we call the National Consortium on AFCA, which is a collaboration between partners across the country about supporting parents and caregivers who are experiencing complex issues and situations with their children that affect family preservation. In the other side of my role, I'm also responsible for strategic programs and projects at Interwoven, which is really more of the focus here today. So I work with our core leadership team, our frontline teams and our board on ensuring that we're building the right tools, the right structures for scale, for sustainability, and for the next phases of our growth. So in that sense, we've worked with Process Fusion over the last 2 years to build out a technology roadmap that aligns to our strategic planning. So coming out of, as you mentioned, COVID-19, we were really already looking at future growth for the organization, where we wanted to go, where parents and caregivers are asking us to go. Our board had developed kind of the plan for the next phase, or the blueprint for the next phase of our growth. And we recognized very much that we needed some help in how we brought that to life from a technology lens and from a business process lens. And so we've worked with your teams at Process Fusion over the last 2 years to really help advance that. And now we are starting to move into implementation of that plan, starting with the launch of our new CRM project.
Perfect. I think one of the key things we'd love to talk about is sustainability as a whole, right? The truth is it's a very broad topic, and today we're here not to talk about environmental sustainability, trees, and different areas. And though these are very important, this conversation primarily is all about how an agency keeps the lights on, adapts and grows, and the challenges you face, right? I think there's two elements we're going to talk about is the pain that every organization has been facing, which is financial challenges, and then also staffing, capacity, and resources, right? And then next, I'd love to talk about where is the plan and how do you address these areas. Like you talked about governance and strategic planning, community engagement and stakeholder relationships, and what this is changing your program services and your infrastructure via the technology. So, go ahead.
Those factors really affect us. When I think about challenges for us, when we think about sustainability, and for us, sustainability and scale really go together. So it's about how are we sustaining what we do now and the ways that we deliver supports and services for families, but also how are we simultaneously building the structure and the ability to scale in response to what communities are asking us for. And, you hit the nail on the head, the one that I think many in the nonprofit space, but certainly us, are facing. Um, financial challenges, the need to diversify funders, the need to diversify revenue streams. That's really core and foundational for us. And so how we think about um, tapping into new funding streams, accessing different sources, even with our existing long-standing relationships, how do we think about expansion and growth within those and broadening, again, the scale, which for us is always about in response to a need from our community, but how we're then driving those conversations with our funders about linking those needs in community to funding and available funding streams. So that,
Mhm.
I think, universal to us. And then, you touched as well on staffing and capacity constraints. We are still at large really a very small organization. And so, and I briefly mentioned before, our model is based on a peer support model, which means all of the supports we offer are grounded in peer-to-peer experiences. So individuals with lived experiences sharing those experiences within their communities. And there's a very human-centric element to that. And it means you really are challenged in thinking about staffing and capacity, where your team is at any given time, and how we're thinking about that combination of really lean financial operations with the need to continually bring um, to develop our staff, to deploy our staff in the most effective ways, to build growth and succession planning and retention planning into that, and both the challenges and the opportunities that that creates.
But
So
Tracy,
I
I
think,
I
go
find it
ahead.
quite interesting. I found because your program involved the parent themselves, a peer-to-peer support program. I try to relate it to other social service programs like Big Brothers or family support. It's equivalent to soliciting volunteer to help the other like people, right? So in your case, your service model is by design involved your client, so-called. They support each other. And I find it very quite interesting. Yeah. So,
The one clarification I would say there is our model, peer-to-peer support can mean volunteers, and we certainly do have an actively engaged community where we are drawing from the lived experience and the expertise of our community.
mhm,
And where a core role within our team is what's called a peer connector role. Um, and those are paid staff positions with specialized, there, it is still a peer model. And
mhm,
you're recruiting from within the community that we're serving as well. That's where the lived experience piece comes in.
mhm,
Peer connectors are part of our paid staff team. We're
mhm,
building training and development into their growth objectives with us and their careers with us. And layering a very specialized peer model on top of the volunteer component to our
mhm.
community.
Very good. I want to go back a little bit because we just talk about because when we first met almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, in your mind, Tracy, in your mind, you have some ideas on how to transform the organization. I'm curious to see before we met, you joined Adopt for Life, how you saw the organization, how you identified the challenges and then you prioritize it. I think, can you go through briefly talk about how you so-called detect the problems and say, here are the things I want to tackle? I just want to hear from you regarding that.
I'm laughing a little bit because I think my come to the nonprofit space maybe in the most traditional lanes. So professionally, my background is actually in tech. I spent probably 5+ years in technology on the customer success side of
No.
organization.
Mhm,
Very used to working with other organizations to understand how could the companies that we were part of from a technology lens, how
mhm,
help organizations achieve their desired impact with their
mhm,
customers.
mhm,
Um, I myself am an adoptive parent, and that's how I first came to Adopt for Life, was as a parent
oh,
myself. So with that lived experience, um, but in joining Adopt for Life and later becoming Interwoven Connections, I think I tend to look at what we do through that lens of how are we using technology as an enabler? How are we thinking about where technology can affect and enable our people? Can it influence business process? Are we using technology in a way that helps us scale? One very specific example, Adopt for Life, from the very beginning, operated in a virtual manner. So we offered virtual supports across the province. Long before COVID, we were operating virtually. And so thinking about creative uses of technology has really been part of how we've operated from the beginning. Post-pandemic, that's even more necessary. So as you know, as restrictions started to lift and as services began to return to quote unquote normal, we started resuming more in-person services. But that virtual component is always a core of how we're able to reach families and reach parents and caregivers across the province, whether you're in a remote rural area, whether you're in an urban center. Our teams are by design spread out across the country. Effectively and creatively partnering with other organizations across the country. It's very rare that we actually have large groups or teams that are co-located in one place. So thinking about technology as an enablement function, from a how do we operate virtually, how do we design and deliver experiences for our community that can be delivered at scale, and how do we think about enabling a staff of teams that have a really wide range of their own technology experience and their own understanding of different technologies, is really kind of all of those things blend together in how we think about how do we approach technology platforms, how do we approach business decisions.
Yeah. So you early on you recognize technology as a strategic enabler for your service delivery. And then you help Adopt for Life and now Interwoven to implement the technologies and enable your team to be more proficient, to be able to reach more audience. Yeah, fantastic. Okay.
So just one of the key elements I've heard, Tracy, is really from the systems of financial limitations, core of service. It was really the fundamental framework of looking at your programs, accessibility as a whole, right? How can people work within the means? How are you delivering the programs and services? And if technology is able to help in the enablement of that, to streamline and automate, this is where technology has flown in, right? One of the excuse my, but how do you even start, right, Tracy? Like, it's easy to say, but like, you had a vision, you knew some of the areas you wanted to look at, right? Many agencies are challenged with, we're barely having enough to keep by right now. Don't have staff, I don't have resources to even look at these areas, right? How did you even put together the time, resources, and energy of what to look at in the short term, long term, and even getting this off the ground, right? Because it's so hard for many agencies to even dedicate the time and resources, let alone manage their own wait lists and capacity. How do you even get that off the ground? Because when we met you, you knew these things, right? But I think that's been a challenge with many agencies.
I think
not having enough money is the first problem people said they have, right? And how do you work around that?
You know, it's interesting, Roger. I hear that. I don't want to downplay at all the having the enough money. It's a very real challenge. And to some extent, you have to go back before that because you don't know if you have enough money or not, if you don't know what you need to do. And so, you know, Marin, to your point, I think for us, really the journey that we're on now really actually started long before thinking about the technology roadmap. We embarked on a strategic planning exercise almost 2.5 years ago with our board that intentionally involved our board, members of our community, our frontline staff, our leadership team, facilitated with a really great external partner. And we used the framework of a theory of change to really get clear on what was the impact we wanted to have as an organization. Because all those challenges you mentioned are so real. We are all dealing with limited funding. We are all dealing with, you know, an overwhelming need for support from the communities we are trying to work with. The demands, especially post-pandemic, are huge. The experiences that are facing families and parents and caregivers are in many cases devastate.
Mhm.
And just thinking about our own teams, thinking about people, thinking about the people we wanted to serve, frankly, thinking about too about communities that we hadn't historically been part of, but that we really wanted to branch into. How did we learn from and how did we support? All of those factors went into a very intentional planning exercise. And to your point, that takes commitment itself. So we did have commitment from our board and commitment from our leadership team to give ourselves the time and space to do that. And that, I will say, is an enabling function. And it involves taking a bit of a risk. It involves taking the risk to say, hey, we're going to prioritize thinking through some of these things, having some really hard conversations about prioritizing what are the things that are really important to us. What does success look like? What are the outcomes? What are we willing to say no to? That was a big organizational shift for us. So you grow, especially when you start as being a grassroots organization that grew from just being really scrappy and doing everything that needed to be done. There's a shift then in saying, what are the things that we need to start saying no to? Or what I often say to our ED is, what are we just saying not yet to? But that enabled us to develop a very clear theory of change and a very clear strategic plan that established then a roadmap for us. And with that roadmap, we could then engage your team to help us with the technology layer of that said, help us build a plan that aligns to these specific outputs. We knew, like, as you said, we know where we want to get to. What we needed to do was help match. Where can technology help us do that? Where can we help make some smart decisions and some smart investments? And how does that line up with things that we know are important to us in terms of who we are, the kinds of services we want to deliver, the communities we want to support, the partnerships we want to form? That combination of our theory of change, our strategic plan, our technology roadmap, like, it sounds like just words, but really those things become grounding principles that you can then make really smart decisions from.
Mhm. Right.
No, that's great. I think just hearing from you, Tracy, it's a hard thing to say, but it's almost like every organization is reactive and trying to just manage day to day from sustainability. It's almost like taking one step back to take two steps forward, right?
100%.
And from like, I think key things is, what is the mission and values of our organization? Are we aligned? Is the service modeling and how we are going to deliver this going to make it? And like you said, yes or no's. These are hard questions for any agency to take on, right? And you need that time. I think
Well,
that's mhm.
balance of, and this I think gets to the core of the sustainability piece, is you have to find that balance of, we still have to do all the day-to-day stuff that is based on vendor requirements, based on service delivery. Like, what are those core, keep the lights on, core delivery things that we need to keep doing, while we also create space for some of this intentional forward-looking pieces.
Mhm. What I can say is, knowing you drive the organization to really adaptive to changes, willing to look at the gaps in the organization and aligned with the strategic plan. In my mind, it's the cultural change that needs to precede the technology change, and I think you phrase it pretty well. You engage the management team, you engage the board to foster this cultural so-called change energized mindset. I think that's very good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I think it's going to sound weird coming from a technology organization, but I think technology is just a buzzword and it's not important. It's an enablement of what it can drive as an impact, right? There are millions of tools out there of how to achieve this, from funding, donation, management in different areas, right, Tracy? One of the things I'd love to hear from you is it's buzzwords of different types of tools. What were those key things that you would mention, from program service to impact to what was the goal that technology was trying to help you achieve in that plan? I know if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to think about how maybe to crystallize some of that, because I don't think it's just one thing.
Hmm.
But if I was to say one thing, for us, everything we do comes down to the people. It's a very human-centric thing that we are doing. And it's, at the end of the day, the technology, as you said, is an enabler, but it's enabling people. So, to your question of what's the technology helping us do, I think it's helping us allow people to connect with people and to build community and connections. And for us, what that looks like, is it's how are we using technology to think through or rethink core business processes. And when you say core business processes, for us in practice, what that means is how are we engaging a parent or a caregiver who is in crisis? What does that look like? What does an intake process look like? How are we tracking what we know about that parent or caregiver and their family to ensure that we're delivering relevant services? And are we doing that consistently and with a high degree of quality so that we can measure our effectiveness? So that's a kind of external looking lens about the people we're wanting to serve. But if you think an internal lens, the folks that are delivering our peer supports, their parents or caregivers themselves. The absolute thing we can do for them is take all the friction points out of the way, or at least as many of the friction points out of the way. Their time is not best spent tracking things in multiple places or making sure they're rigorously following a process guide. The more that we can reduce the administrative barrier on them or burden on them and free up their time to spend time with parents and caregivers, that's the heart of what they do. So where technology can help us automate routine tasks, where it can help improve or simplify data collection, where it can standardize things that we need them to track to meet funder requirements, but aren't really the core value of what they do, the more that we can do that, it's better for them and it's better for our community. And frankly, it's better for things like employee retention and employee satisfaction. And then I think the piece that, throughout all of this, that I think there's maybe less of a connection directly to technology, but it's again tied to that idea of a roadmap, is where are we thinking about diversifying knowledge, skills, people's experiences, particularly, for us, this is relevant at all levels of our organization, but particularly from a leadership team lens. How are we diversifying the skill sets, the experiences, and the people and talent within our leadership so that we're just bringing more thoughts and different perspectives to decision making for our organization? Then when you can combine that with technology, we're taking a broader lens and a more informed or inclusive lens to how we're making decisions that technology can help us implement.
Thank you. I think that was a great point. What I really got from that is reduce the friction, and from leveraging technology in different ways, regardless of the technology, to reduce it from a direct services side. The next area is diversification of knowledge, insights. Roger, I'd love to hear your points around technology diversity and reducing friction. But one element, Tracy, which is still that elephant in the room, financial diversification, right? Could you tell us about even technology, or what financial diversification is and how you've looked at this? Because from single source funding, organized agencies relying on grants year over year, donations, which are donation management, which is not relatively stable. What has financial diversification meant for you, and what's your roadmap around that?
I think, honestly, I think this is one we're still, like everyone, we're still figuring out. So, historically, the bulk of our program funding has been single source through government or public funding. So we're very intentional about how we form business partners and creative partnerships with community agencies, with other potential funders, even within the ministries where we are funded today, to demonstrate the value and impact, to speak directly to the needs that we see from communities. But that creative partnership is, I think, what's making the biggest difference for us. So how we think about partnerships in different forms or from different sources that let us, kind of combine together what we know and the things we are good at in terms of service delivery with other community partners and where their strengths are. Because then we can start to demonstrate to potential funders sustainability plans. I think that's key. I think, in fact, if I was to focus on one specific area, I would say that is, I think as funders are looking for where they're making smart investments, they're looking for what's your sustainability plan. So, the idea of we're just going to keep going back to the same funders year over year asking for more money, I don't know that that's realistic anymore. And at a minimum, it's a shrinking pot that you're dealing with. So where we can blend more innovative strategies with proven effective quality service delivery, then we can start to demonstrate sustainability plans that involve more partners that inherently then lets us tap into potential new funders.
That's great. Roger,
Yeah, I can
is there
add
any comments you have, please?
Yeah, I can add a bit to how, I guess, because Tracy and I, we work together on to help them modernize, right? So I can share my insight or my experience in this regard. There are a lot of agencies similar to Adopt for Life. They start up with a very manual process. The staff could be working very hard. They have impact in the community, but they are not able to prove it. In the case of Interwoven, they have a single source funding, but they also need to prove to the funder how effective they are, the outcome. So I think a few common things we see from other agencies, which Interwoven has as well, which is the lack of optimized business process in terms of managing the service delivery, in terms of managing the client. So we help Interwoven to basically create what we call, sometimes refer to a CRM or a centralized database so that they can manage the client information, they can manage the client, they can track the client outcome properly. So as an end result, they can create a report on the service delivery. They can demonstrate to the funder the outcome of the service. So this is how technology could help to help streamline the business process, to optimize or to increase efficiency of their team. In this case, either the internal staff or better coordination with the peer-to-peer programs, and be able to create a report to demonstrate appropriate KPI for the program funding. So I think this is how us as a partner help Interwoven Connections using technology.
I think we have a few more minutes, and please, everyone, if there's any questions you have, please put them in the chat. We do have about 15 minutes left, so we'd love to hear questions. And we'll interject at any time. I think one of the pieces is, Tracy, you hit it, is taking one step back, like we talked about, one step back, two steps forward. This can't all be revolutionary, right? There's so many different agencies doing direct services, service support, helping other service providers support clients, like in your organization. One of the things I'm hoping to hear from Roger and yourself, Tracy, is like the word partnerships and shared services. We're all kind of in this together when we're in our own buckets, but we're all in the same lake or ocean, right? And we're going through the same global issues and the same challenges. How has, in your world, like from using best practices, learning from what other agencies are doing, collaboration, right? How is that really helping from a sustainability standpoint, at least accelerate you getting off the ground, right? Because it shouldn't be everything is net new and you're figuring this out. There should be things that you should be able to learn from. Oh, you know what? We've heard this from another organization. We know this. Maybe these are areas. I wouldn't say they're quick wins, but they're areas of focus, and these are areas we could just benchmark against.
Well, and I think you're right. And I think it's about not thinking you have to reinvent the wheel every time. There's a huge benefit in being very humble about what are the things you are really good at and that you do provide unique value in, and where are the areas that either you don't and someone else does, or where you can leverage or learn from best practices, whether that's in research or evidence-based practices, whether that's in communities. I think one of the things that is really central to our culture is the idea that there is just this immense amount of knowledge in communities about what they need and how to meet those needs. Thinking that we're going to come into communities, particularly communities we haven't served before, and say, you know, we know what you need and we've got an answer for you. It's ridiculous, to be blunt. You know, respecting the knowledge that already exists with communities about what they need and what they want from people and organizations who want to partner with them is key. And so how we think about, you know, that term best practice really is very broad about where can we be learning, where can we be taking or learning from knowledge that already exists and sharing knowledge with partners, but bi-directionally. And then thinking about what parts of that are we best to, can we add value to, what parts are we best to deliver to, and what parts are really we add so much more value by being a good partner. I think that's the kind of the external facing lens. And then, you know, I think the piece that's maybe not as evident, but we've learned a lot from is when we think about internally, and when you think about technology and best practice and all of that, you really need to have an explicit focus on change management and how you're bringing those learnings into your organization and expressly building that into how do you change how you think as an organization, how you work as an organization, how your teams work together, which kind of has this full circle approach of we have seen at least things like end user adoption of new technologies is just we get there faster when we're intentional about change management practices and bringing in those learnings from other partners and other communities.
That's great, Tracy. Thank you. Roger, any comments from yourself?
No, I think it's fantastic. No, not right now.
Okay, so I think just a recap really from change management quick wins, it's trying to learn, see if there's collaboration in clusters that you've been going through. Bi-directional communication, I think, is an area of trying to break down barriers of learning from each other. From a technology lens, I would say these are areas where those recipes and different tools and different things are openly available, right? It's not about commoditizing infrastructure, it's about openly sharing it, right? And sharing different tools and processes where available and enabling it, right? Like Tracy, I know from yourself, you looked your diversification of funding, you're looking at fundraising and donation management, right? Where we've seen financial diversification for programs and services is trying to standardize and simplify program service modeling. So even if you take on more unique funding requirements, you have a model that can be easily adaptable to new programs and services, right? So these types of best practices is, I think, critical of just being in a network where you're able to share and collaborate with each other. And I hope that this being one of those first examples, we're trying to facilitate that and those idea sharings, right? And I hope, Tracy, people can come to you directly, and I'll post Tracy's information. Everyone, you can see her on our LinkedIn. Please, we're always willing to have open conversations and share those practices with anyone, right? I think with that, if there's, I'm just trying to see if there's any questions. No. The last thing I really wanted to just say is we really want to put some support behind this word of collaboration and helping sustainable organizations. So when we talked about behaviors, best practices in different areas, one of the key things that our organization is doing is we are still going to be launching our Tech for Change grant. So as Tracy, if organizations don't have your resources in different areas, we spend the time to help organizations connect those different impacts from social impact, accessibility in different areas, and create that roadmap of how agencies can use technology. This isn't necessarily using ours, but it's using a vendor agnostic method to map out those dots and how to get there. And if there's a way that we could donate or manage and share our technology openly with other agencies, we'd love to do that. So this information is posted. We'll be sending you follow-ups after, and I'll just be giving some of the attendees a call just to see if there's any needs on these areas. But this is our way of giving back our time to help agencies, especially in the next year. My only ask is we go through year end just as much as everyone else. So we are really just challenged based on resources and the scope of how much time we can give back. So with that, Tracy, Roger, I really appreciate you taking the time for this discussion. Is there any questions from anyone on the call before we wrap up? Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I really hope you found this webinar useful. We will send you the details, but I would just request, in an effort to constantly improve, you just take a few minutes to fill out our Q&A survey after. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Bye-bye.